Another Generation 9 DLC is upon us, the Indigo Disk. The game has been shaken up, so we once again shall examine the winners and losers of this new mode of play. If you haven't seen our previous such videos, what this means is that we're taking a look at Pokemon which previously existed, i.e. no new additions like Iron Boulder, Gouging Fire, or Raging Bolt, since they had no previous existence to measure their newfound status against, and seeing which of these newly affected were the most buffed, aka the winners, and which were the most nerfed, aka the losers. We're doing 3 of each, and we've also got an honorable mention section. So that's our setup, and with that out of the way, let's jump right into the winners and losers of the Indigo Disk DLC metagame. As a powerful physical ice attack, Triple Axle is as valuable as its potential miss rate is infuriating, with its coverage and strength ripping through much of the metagame, providing it hits all 3 times or at all. Our first winners have been gifted Triple Axle in the Indigo Disk, and for Weavile, it's finally regained the move. It brandished Triple Axle to superb effect, accuracy willing anyway, en route to becoming a metagame defining terror throughout Generation 8 OU. Then Generation 9 ripped the move out of its move pool, only to re-gift it later. The same ordeal Weavile went through with Knockoff, which had been re-gifted in the previous DLC. In Game Freak's world, this is generosity. In the real world, this would be considered manipulative and abusive, and not something to be tolerated. Important considerations aside, now that Weavile brandishes both ferocious stabs again, it can make the most of its excellent speed stat to tear through OU, blitzing past even threats already considered fast like Cinderace, Greninja, Meowscarada, and non-boosted Iron Boulder. And this greater viability also means Weavile is better poised to use its Ice Shard to check faster threats like Dragapult and boosted Roaring Moon. Weavile is set to unleash its full capacity as a top-tier OU threat. Its outstanding dual stabs smashing through the ever-present Great Tusk, Goldengo, Clodsire, and Tinglu, as well as other threats like Raging Bolt, Hydrapple, and even the #1 winner of this video. Speaking of, that brings us to the similarly apt Meowscarada, which was already a massive threat and now becomes even more terrifying with the addition of Triple Axle's excellent coverage, which it could potentially even gain stab on through Protean if used as its first attack upon switching in a particular time. Even without the stab boost though, it's an amazing weapon, as being able to threaten a cold one-hit KO at all times on the newly returned from Uber's Gliscor is utterly magnificent. Zapdos, Enamorus, and Roaring Moon no longer being able to check it also makes Meowscarada an absolute menace. Meowscarada was good before, but now it has returned to its early Gen 9 status of being one of the scariest Pokemon around, and it's more terrifying than ever with how many Pokemon it can smash for super effective damage off of its excellent base 110 attack stat. There's pretty much nothing besides Toxapex that can take it on long term. With Triple Axle added to its moveset, Meowscarada blasts through every other regenerator in the tier, like Hydrapple and Tornadus, and is immensely difficult to withstand defensively, while its speed makes checking it offensively not exactly a walk in the park. And for how they're triple axling their way through OU, Meowscarada and Weavile have earned the collective rank of the 3rd winner of the Indigo Disk. Corviknight has been fighting an uphill battle throughout Generation 9, as its defogging capabilities have been blocked by Goldengo since day 1, and it has struggled at times to keep up with the outrageous levels of power creep thrown at it. Its issues have now come to a head, and it is worse than it has been at any point before, thanks to the introduction of Deoxys Speed as the new best hazard Pokemon, for now anyway, which really ensures Corviknight will never keep the field hazard-free. DOS will taunt it as it's setting up, and the ease with which it spams hazards just amplifies the prominence and potency of Goldengo, lurking in the background to stifle defog afterwards. Even packing defog on Corviknight can often feel like pointless dead weight. It's really never going to actually successfully use the move in this new metagame, so in practice you don't get the theoretical hazard-free field you count on when you put defog on it in the team builder. Okay, but that's fine, because Corviknight is more than just a defogging machine, and it famously also has a defensive niche, right? Well, yes, but with the return of Skarmory, Corviknight also struggles to distinguish itself as a defensive steel flying type. Instead of failing to remove hazards, Skarm lays them itself, providing extra pressure for its teammates in addition to providing that same incredible physically defensive support. Now, Corviknight is not unviable by any means, as it still boasts several distinct advantages like great natural special bulk and U-turn, but it has dropped in viability overall. Now it's the least of the losers since it's not catastrophic relative to where it was, but it has definitely earned the number 3 spot. Deoxys Defense's current placement is remarkably reminiscent of Generation 5. There, it had been released into OU, but so had Deoxys Speed, and with much of the player base preferring DOS for their hazard lead needs, DOD dropped to UU, where it remained without a hitch for some time. At the time of this video, DOD looks like it's going to drop to UU again. Funnily enough, previously players eventually realized DOD was basically on par with DOS as far as hazard stacking goes, which led to DOD's eventual rise to and then ban from OU in Gen 5, and it then sharing OU with DOS until they were banned simultaneously in Gen 6. This was considered the final straw. They were, based on the way the game was at the time, fundamentally not Pokemon you wanted to have in OU for how easy it was to use them and overwhelm opponents with quick hazards, and thus they were not tested again in Gen 7. Deoxys remained unreleased in Generation 8, but there, something changed the entire fabric of the game: the addition of heavy-duty boots, allowing Pokemon to ignore hazards entirely. There was some discussion of if the speed and defense forms used for their hazard stacking would still be broken in such a new game, and now that they have finally been released, that theory is being put to the test. It's still very new, but at the very least they are not immediately warping the game as they did previously, and in the case of Deoxys Defense, it is completely overshadowed by its speed form, whose niche as the fastest Pokemon around is incredibly valuable in an OU tier whose speed tiers are absolutely insane. Previously, they could be fairly interchangeable in much slower paced metagames they coexisted in, but now that is no longer the case. As a result, Deoxys Defense has gone all the way down from Ubers to, at this point, an unimpressive OU Pokemon who seems all but certain to hit the UU tier once again. Of course, it is Deoxys Defense, so it's likely to excel in the UU tier, and it's as good a contender as any for a Pokemon that could come back to OU and leave a major impact. After all, it has knockoff. So much for heavy-duty boots. But for now though, it comes in as the number 2 loser on this list for such a drastic drop. Skarmory was already mentioned in the Corviknight blurb, and it must be stressed just how much it is preferred at this point in time. Skarmory itself didn't receive much of note in Gen 9, just Drill Run, which is a decent move but hardly essential for anywhere close to it really. But it's a winner because of just how well it fits into the OU landscape. It provides crucial physically defensive backbone against a host of massive threats: Zamazenta, Roaring Moon, King Gambit, the list goes on, and this makes it a crucial stabilizing presence. This has historically been one of Skarmory's great talents. When there are wild new threats running around, it counters some of the big ones, and even those it doesn't hard counter. It helps play around through a mix of its typing, bulk, and spikes. Yes, those spikes are what makes Skarmory such an excellent physically defensive choice. Rather than just be a passive blob whose role is to merely temporarily stave off opposing threats before eventually being overwhelmed, Skarmory uses its physical bulk to support its own team, to advance its own user's win condition by making the threats on its own side much scarier. When you use Skarm as a wall, you are playing offense while playing defense, which is the best way to play defense. As such, Skarmory has decidedly eclipsed Corviknight and currently holds a top spot in the metagame, crucial for how it staves off such screaming cacophony of tier crushers while enabling those very same Pokemon on its own side. Now, before we get to the number 1 in both the losers and the winners category, we must quickly go over some honorable and dishonorable mentions. In the losers category, we've got Kyurem. Now, it feels wrong to really call it a loser, hence the dishonorable mention. After all, it remains an elite OU force, but now it is undeniably a step below the terror it was capable of wreaking havoc in the previous generation. Now, Gen 8 Kyurem didn't need Roost, but it's quite difficult to imagine it being banned without the move, as it was instrumental in allowing so many of its sets to bombard the opponent with its destructive assault time and time again, especially for sets that preferred items like Never Melt Ice or Heavy Duty Boots. This does limit Kyurem's game, but it remains a force with Specs and Dragon Dance, the latter set recalling the same type monstrosity back Excalibur with loaded dice alongside Scale Shot and Icicle Spear. On the winner's side, we have Latios, which has gained some incredible new tools which are just begging to be taken advantage of to their full potential. Its signature move Luster Purge, overshadowed and unused for so long, has finally been buffed. It went from 70 base power to 95, which makes it stronger than Psychic right off the bat, meaning Latios can effectively utilize it as an offensive weapon and not just for its nasty secondary effect. A whopping 50% chance to drop special defense. That kind of thing is much better when coming from an actually threatening attack. Latios also received an incredible new move, Psychic Noise, which prevented healing for 2 following turns, including from leftovers, but as a 75 base power stab move with good super effective effective coverage. Finally, Latios even got flip turn, because you know what was missing from its move pool? A switch move, of course. Latios' move pool is now an utter embarrassment of riches. And finally, though this video is single-centered, we must mention Incineroar, which is now poised to be even more of a perfect VGC Pokemon, as it has gained Helping Hand, just when you thought it couldn't provide more support. Oh, and its Dark Stab now has the option to be the incredible knockoff. Oh, and it also has amazing fighting coverage and close combat. Let the new level of Incineroar roars begin. And as a fun aside, we must also mention the adorable fan favorite Chinchino, which is amazingly actually viable and seeing some real usage. Thanks to receiving Tidy Up. Alongside Technician and Loaded Dice, it is now tossing out colossally powerful tail slaps, as well as boosted Bullet Seeds, Rock Blast, and increased accuracy of Triple Axle. Darkrai started its Generation 4 as one of the most terrifying forces in Ubers, and continued in that vein for several generations. Superb speed even by Uber standards, alongside a reliable sleep move in Dark Void, already made it a nasty counter, and it was helped out in this vein by its Bad Dreams ability, damaging any Pokemon asleep in its presence. It wasn't just a sleep machine either, it also used its great speed to fire off fierce stab Dark Pulses off of an enormous special attack, possibly boosted even further by Nasty Plot with Focus Blast, crushing steels that would try and resist. The Fairy type came around in Generation 6 and resisted both, but Darkrai didn't miss a beat. No, Xerneas would want to switch into it for fear of Sludge Bomb. Darkrai was so good in Gen 6 Ubers that some players thought its presence was a net negative for the tier, even playing some tournaments without it. Darkrai was tested in OU briefly once, at the beginning of Generation 5. There's plenty of fighting types, they said. It'll be fine, they said. And it slaughtered the tier so badly, it was immediately rocketed back up to Ubers. The player base shivering and traumatized, fervently swearing to never even entertain the thought of bringing it back. However, in Gen 6 VGC, Smeargle got up to all kinds of untoward mischief with Dark Void, and Game Freak decided to nerf it. You think that making it so that Dark Void could only be used by Darkrai would have solved the issue, right? Well, apparently not, and in a classic Game Freak good decision, Dark Void was also nerfed to 50% accuracy, making it worse than not only famously bad sleep move Hypnosis, but Grass Whistle as well. Thus, even Darkrai wouldn't use Dark Void now. It would use Hypnosis if anything. But seeing as Hypnosis was awfully unreliable, you wouldn't even bother with that and would just use other moves instead. But a Darkrai that wasn't sleeping opponents wasn't worth much in Ubers, so it wasn't used. The idea of testing Darkrai unable to sleep opponents anymore in OU again was floated at various points during Gen 7, but was ultimately ruled out because it was clear that, unlike in Ubers, Darkrai would overwhelm OU without needing sleep, thanks to its incredible speed and special attack alongside Nasty Plot and Z moves. Now in Gen 9, Z moves are gone, and Darkrai's speed is nowhere near as impressive as it was. Thus, it has dropped into OU, and while it's definitely good, it's nowhere near what you'd expect from such a long-time Uber. It just goes to show how drastically Scarlet and Violet have changed the game with their hyper min-max power creep. Now, of course, a terrestrializing Darkrai can become quite challenging to face, but it doesn't really stand out that much relative to all the other utterly insane threats flying in every direction right now. Sure, Darkrai is threatening, but so are a million other things. Darkrai isn't threatening in a way that's particularly unique or overwhelming, at least not right now. It sure has the potential to make itself top tier OU once its vast move pool has been mined and the metagame has settled down. Then again, wouldn't it be hilarious to see Darkrai in UU? Regardless of whether it gets to that point, the fact that Darkrai went from Uber to solid yet unspectacular in OU makes it the #1 choice for this list. Now, why, you wonder, if Deoxys defense is knocking on the doors of UU? Well, Deoxys defense has been UU before, and without controversy for some time. The only time Darkrai had ever touched OU before had been short and bloody. Being so thoroughly tamed by OU in such a new way is a far worse nerf and makes Darkrai deserving of its placement. Superior has been an OU menace since it gained Contrary in ORAS, but it's been elevated to new levels since arriving in Generation 9 thanks to the many terrors of terrestrialization, with Terra Blast giving it whatever coverage it likes, from Fire for a tried and true combination with Grass Stab, to Ground, to Water, and to Stellar. Oh yes, there is a new Terra type, Stellar Terrestrialization, and Superior is a perfect abuser of it. Stellar Terra maintains the user's type, which is just fine for Superior, as Pure Grass is amazing typing and actually enjoys enjoys keeping, and provides a one-time boost to moves of each type. What this means is that if Stellar, Terra, Superior switched in, that would get the boost, but since that was the one-time boost for grass moves, a subsequent Giga Drain would not be boosted. Non-stab moves were boosted by 20%, and stab moves were doubled in base power. In practice, this is huge for Superior, famous for its contrary supported special attack boosted Leaf Storms. Now the major difference is that its first Leaf Storm is already doubled in power thanks to Stellar Terra, meaning it is much more threatening right off the bat and gets many more opportunities to blast the opponent as a result. Oh, and that's not all, because Superior is also a perfect user of Stellar Terra Blast, which jumps to 100 base power as opposed to Terra Blast's usual 80, and it is neutral against everything except Terra Pokemon, which it strikes super effectively. Now it's too bad there's a downside where it drops attack and relevant to Superior special attack. Oh wait, Superior has contrary, so this actually boosts those stats. Now Superior boosts its attack with its coverage as well, which is much stronger than the previous generation's hidden power. It is utterly incredible, and that's just with 2 move slots, leaving it free to terrorize the opponent with Substitute and Glare or Leech Seed as well. Stellar Terra is just another option for Superior too. Early calls for Superior's ban have subsided, but it has become among OU's most elite Pokemon, shaping the metagame as much as it blasts through it. It is the defining Stellar Terastallization Pokemon at this point in time, and for this as well as how tremendous it is with Terastallization as a whole, Superior is the biggest winner of the Indigo Disk DLC. And that's it. Of course, this kind of list is quite subjective, and one could definitely reorder this type of thing. Plus, we can only fit so many of the new additions. For example, we'd have loved to have slotted in Metagross and its newfound access to Heavy Slam, Psychic Fangs, and Knockoff. That's an exciting one, which is definitely going to shake up the lower tiers. Let us know what you think of this list, what you'd change, what you'd add, what you'd remove, and what you thought of the Indigo Disk DLC's changes as a whole. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching, everyone. And as always, if you liked the video and you want to see more, be sure to subscribe to False Swipe Gaming for more weekly Pokemon content. And thank you so much to our patrons for continued support of our videos, and thank you to everyone else watching as well. And follow my crew on these social media platforms. And that's all I got. See you next time, everyone.